Hello, and welcome to our podcast for college Catholics. I'm your host, Father Patrick Wainwright. Today I have a guest, Anne, who is a student at the University of Michigan, and she will share a little bit about a servant of God from Italy, Chiara Petrillo. But first of all, before talking about Chiara, let's ask Anne a little bit about her. How are you doing, Anne?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
Yeah, thank you for joining us here today. So you're a student at the University of Michigan, so you were born and raised in Michigan?
Yes, right in this area too.
Oh, awesome. That's good. So, and you're a sophomore?
Yeah. Sophomore.
Okay, and what's your major?
I'm a biomedical science major.
All right. Well, that's pretty intense, it looks.
Yeah, unfortunately it is.
Very good. Well, and what do you hope to do after you graduate?
I do plan on going to medical school eventually.
Very good. And do you know what area of medical school?
I do want to just be a physician. I have no idea what kind yet. I'm kind of keeping that open.
Perfect. Very good. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Any fun fact that you have going on these days and so forth?
Yeah, well, I am an emergency medical technician for our local ambulance service.
So that's like a job apart from your school?
Yes,
okay.
Completely. It's a part-time job, but you know, I pick up whenever I want and have a lot of fun on the ambulances on the road all the time.
And what type of things do you do?
So we do everything from transferring patients to going on motor vehicle accidents to taking care of people who are, have had an emergency and getting them to the hospital alive and just being there for them at their worst moments.
Right. And it's really important to be kind and gentle with those, like they're like really freaking out. And I remember I was in an ambulance once or twice, I think. So yeah, it was really helpful to have friendly people at like a nurse or drivers that are they talk to you and stuff. So And what are you doing today? I heard you have an exam of sorts.
I have an exam, and it is for my work, and I'm going to be trying to become a cleared EMT, meaning I'll be the senior on my truck, and basically meaning I'll be running my own basic truck, which is awesome. We call them trucks. They are ambulances.
Right. Because there's always two of you in the truck.
Yes.
You'll be a truck driver.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
okay.
But it also means that I get to work with other paramedics on advanced care units. So it's a lot more fun when they trust me because I am cleared. So.
Right. So you're like a senior, like more knowledgeable EMT.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Wow. Well, we'll be praying for you that it goes well. I'm sure it will go well.
Thank you.
And that your guardian angel helps you in all your endeavors when you're driving out in the streets.
Yeah.
It's I guess it's pretty intense moments, right?
I always wear a miraculous medal and St. Michael medal on my left arm. I put a band on my left arm, and it's kind of like my sword and shield,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that all the EMTs wear one of those so that when one of us is in an accident or something, the miraculous medal and the guardian angel help us. So that's awesome. Well, thank you very much for all that you do and for being here today. So let's talk about Chiara Corbella Petrillo a little bit. So Corbella was her maiden name, and Petrillo is after she married. She was born in 1984 and died in June 13th, 2012 at the age of 28. So she was pretty young.
Yeah.
But she is now a servant of God. So why don't you tell us a little bit about her life? Why is it that she, she's so, I don't want to say holy, but she's kind of a very holy person.
She is,
and she's in the process of canonization. She's not cleared yet to be a saint, but she's in that process.
Yeah, exactly. Well, she was very young when she first met her husband, and they met on a pilgrimage to Medjugorje, and they were very devout. And in the dating, they had a lot of turbulence. They had a lot of on and off. And
what was going on? Were they not sometimes getting along well? They were butting heads. They were arguing. What was going on?
They were very passionate young people. So they
Italian.
were exactly
Italiani.
Exactly. So they would often fight, and they broke up several times, and even broke off an engagement. And Chiara said that this was the hardest thing she went through in her life, despite all the suffering she did endure. And I think she says that because it's the first time she truly discovered to trust in the Lord, and surrender can be so difficult for people to learn because it's just on the opposite side of fear.
Right, especially you're engaged, you're looking forward to marriage, you start planning, and then suddenly you say, "Oh, yeah, I shouldn't get married, or at least not at this point, not as we are talking to each other right now. We may have to reassess some things. Maybe they were like you said." A little bit, and when we were talking off the air, we said a little bit they were like immature. What was it?
Yeah, so they were just very young, and just a young couple is.
Right.
They're not sure of themselves and what's going on. They lacked the wisdom of experience, and
right.
Yeah, that which they surrendered to Our Lady and consecrated themselves to Our Lady, and eventually became a very holy couple.
Right, which is helpful and hopeful to know, right? That we can mess up a little, hopefully not too much, but a little bit when you're younger, and then you still have an option to convert, to grow, to become more mature in your faith and in virtue, and even in this case, be holy. Yeah, why don't you tell us? You keep going. Tell us. I don't want to interrupt you too much, but so they got finally engaged, and then what happened?
Yeah, well, first going off of their vocation, they truly lived a vocation of marriage, and they both had discerned about their vocation, and so
they had thought about consecrating their lives to God, and they figured they should get married.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Well, that's good because everyone should consider, right? Everyone listening, you should consider whether God is calling you to marriage or to a consecrated life, and once you know. No, God, I want to be holy. We all know that's our vocation. And I think God is calling me to be holy within marriage. Okay, that's great, and that's your path, and you stick to that.
Yeah, so they eventually grew together as a married couple, and they lived on the premise that they are to give back everything that they have been given, and that's their vocation. That is how they live out their vocation. So very shortly after they were married, they discovered they were pregnant with their first child. This child was diagnosed in the first ultrasound with encephaly, which means the child basically would not live and may even die in the womb because they are forming without a brain. So the doctors, being the normal modern doctors,
modern doctors,
yes, they of course pushed Chiara to get an abortion because saying it would be unsafe for her and for the child.
Right. Not every doctor is like that, but some, like that's, if you want a more common trend today, which everyone should expect in a sense to encounter, right? So maybe you hit a miss. Maybe you get a doctor that is more pro-life and encouraging, and yes, you have to defend life, but maybe others say, no, this is a child that's going to die, so maybe the best way is to have an abortion.
Yeah, so Chiara actually made a great relationship with one of the doctors who was pro-life and supported her throughout her entire life, the rest of her life, with all her other pregnancies, which is really important that she had that relationship.
Right, so in this case, some doctors suggested that she have an abortion, and how did she respond?
So this was her OBGYN who really did support her, even though she knew it was not a necessarily smart decision medically to not abort.
So she was absolutely certain she was not going to commit an abortion.
Yes,
okay, good,
Chiara
good for
never, ever considered an abortion. But she basically went through the pregnancy and carried Maria through term, and Maria was born and died an hour after being born, but not before Chiara and Enrico had her baptized.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that must be so hard, right?
Yeah.
So at least they baptized her, they held her, and then they had to bury her, right?
Exactly.
So that's so hard.
Exactly. And 2-ish months after that pregnancy, they discovered they were pregnant again. And first ultrasound looked clean. And then second ultrasound, once again, they found that this baby had a completely separate disorder and nothing genetic. It was absolute just the Lord's will that this happened because they were two unrelated events, that this child was born with or would have been born without organs that are needed for life functions, didn't have legs and limbs. So again, the doctors pushed Chiara to abort, and she once again said no. And she carried Davide to term. And he was baptized right after he was born, and a few minutes later he passed away.
Wow.
And Enrico, carried Davide to the morgue, but not without being very joyful in all of this. Both Chiara and Enrico had talked about Maria must have gone to heaven and told the Lord that send Davide to my parents because they let me live and they got me baptized and got me here to you. And that's what Chiara had said in her lifetime, which is really truly beautiful, a beautiful expression of understanding of God's goodness and will.
Absolutely. Yeah, and also understanding the value of life, the value of a soul, that now, although they died in this world, they live forever, right? And because they're baptized, they will be in heaven, and they didn't commit any sin, right? They go directly to heaven, and they will be with God forever. That's amazing.
And it's not like Chiara and Enrico were not normal young married couple. They were, of course, truly, truly sad, but they had such an understanding and love for the Lord, and God's will was their ultimate. They didn't have expectations that they were disappointed by because they just trusted that the Lord had the best plan. And so they ended up getting pregnant again shortly after. And
so how old it was Chiara at this point? She was like 26.
Yeah, she was
27.
At this point, she was 27 years old because...
Right, she died at 28,
yes.
And she had the baby. She was able to hold her baby for about a year, right? But let's not jump the gun. So why don't we... Yeah, tell us again. So they got pregnant the third time, and then what happened?
So actually, before the pregnancy, she and Enrico had been to several pro-life talks, and they were often the speakers at these events talking about their... Right,
that's an amazing thing. There's like YouTube videos of Chiara giving talks, pro-life talks, and talking about her hardship, right? Her cross, her pregnancies, and how she was pro-life and defended, the life of these children.
Yeah, it's truly striking how young and beautiful this couple is. She was absolutely a gorgeous woman, and speaking in such a holy way, you can just see just the radiance of the Lord behind her, which is beautiful. Anyways, on her third pregnancy with Francesco, her son, Francesco was completely healthy, and she was unfortunately diagnosed with a malignant tumor during this pregnancy.
Right. So that is really in the hands of God, right? So exactly. Everything was well. The first pregnancy, the first child had a difficulty. The second child pregnancy was, again, the child had a difficulty. And now that the third pregnancy is going well, the one who has the health difficulty is the mom.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a picture in the book, which I think you said would be linked down below.
Right. I will, because there's a lot of sources for the life of Chiara Petrillo, but one of them in the U.S. in English is a book, Witness to Joy, right? So we'll put a link to that book. And what you were saying something about the picture?
Yeah, so there's a picture right after she got her diagnosis, and she's pregnant, and it's a beautiful new pregnancy, and the baby's healthy, but she has just gotten her bad diagnosis, and it's her walking out of the hospital with Enrico, just arm in arm, looking like a beautiful couple that just is going to have a baby. They're not looking like it's the end of a chapter. And
wow, because they told her the cancer was terminal.
Yeah, so actually they had told Enrico, the doctors had told Enrico that the cancer was terminal, and he was the one who had to gather up the strength to tell Chiara.
Wow.
So it just goes to show how beautiful their relationship was and how true marriage should be, how they love each other so much. And
also how their faith strengthened them to carry all these things. It's still difficult to do that. It's hard. These are crosses, but at the same time, they were able to carry them with a spirit of faith and a spirit of joy and finding strength in each other and in Jesus Christ. They couldn't have done this if they had not had faith.
Right. And Chiara always mentioned that it was her husband, it was her friends, and her spiritual director. They were very close with him too, Father Vito. But they as a married couple, gave each other the strength. They were Christ to each other and never forgot who was really in charge.
So then they were told about this malignant cancer, right? So it was a terminal cancer, and then what happened?
So she went through with the pregnancy. They actually wanted her to abort Francesco so that
the baby was good
the
now,
healthy
this time.
Baby, because they wanted her to have a specific treatment for the cancer, and in order to have that treatment, it would have been unhealthy for the baby, and so they thought for baby and mom, abort the child so that she can get her treatment and
for the
be cancer
safety,
free.
For the health of the mother.
Yeah.
Abort the child.
Exactly.
Okay, that's so illogical, right?
Yeah.
But anyway.
And at this point, Chiara does mention that the doctors knew her. So they did understand, and they didn't fight back when she said, I'm not going to abort. And she went through a surgery to remove the malignant tumor in her mouth. And
so this was while she had the pregnancy?
Yeah, while she was pregnant. And then immediately, like hours after giving birth to Francesco, she went right into surgery. To remove more malignant tumors in her body.
As she started a cancer treatment.
Exactly.
Probably.
And at that point was when it was truly told to them that she would not be living. She was a terminal patient. And after that, they met with Pope Benedict XVI.
Oh, wow.
Talked with him and just gave him a short synopsis of their story, which is beautiful as a family. There's also a picture of that in the book. But she just lived the rest of her life. She died very shortly after, like you said, about a year.
But she was able to hold her child. She was able to, and also she wrote like a letter to her child, right?
Yes.
So at both the parents, how was it?
Yes. So the letter was just absolutely beautiful. It's at the end of the book when the child is only a year old, but they basically write a love poem to him and tell him, this may seem like a tragedy on the outside, but it's actually beautiful because it is the will of the Lord, and there's nothing that can surpass that wisdom and beauty that we can't understand.
Wow! And then what about her death? Did you read anything about what happened when she died and the people that attended and whatever?
Well, she had very close friends, and obviously they were with her when she died, and her husband and her family. But her funeral was huge. Many people attended it because everybody knew what kind of woman this was and her witness to joy, as the book calls it. And so everybody knew she was a very special woman, and she had
been a speaker too, so she was somewhat known.
Somewhat known, and
a little bit at least.
Yeah, I think the priest that did her funeral, or it was the cardinal, or it was someone special that did her funeral.
Right. A bishop, let's say, maybe a bishop.
Yes, they had likened her to to Saint Gianna Molla.
Right.
Yeah.
Very similar case. Very similar case. Well, the mother prefers not to undergo treatment to not damage the child, knowing that, they may be going to die because of the late treatment after the birth of the child.
Yeah. And personally, I do see the relationship. Like, I likened her to Saint Gianna Molla as well, but I think Chiara's biggest witness is the fact that no matter what your lot is in life, no matter what the plan God has for you, there is a path for you to sainthood, and it's in the little choices. It's not like she had a special path and she can be a saint. Right. It's the specificity in your life that God has planned that you just say yes, like she did. And so I think that's the biggest lesson we can take from her life.
Right. And also that it is embracing God's cross every day. And the situations that God presents to me, to see that, to really truly believe that we're in the hands of God, that there's a providence, there's a plan of God, and that we can be holy no matter what our path, as long as we're faithful to God and His gospel, His commandments, to try to love one another, right, to serve God above all, right? So I think that's where her simple, very simple life, in a sense of there's nothing extraordinary. She got married. She had some issues when they were dating. They finally got married. Then they got pregnant. The two of the kids were going to die. Then she had a third one. She had cancer. Like, all these things happened to many people throughout the world, right? Many, many people. And especially today, there's so much of these health situations. So that embracing our cross, embracing these difficulties is not easy, but with Christ, we can not only embrace them with joy, but also sanctify ourselves, right?
Right. And in the last line of the book, it says, trust in him, it is worth the pain. And there's another quote from the book saying, whatever the Father asked her to do, he also gave her the strength to do it. In her weakness, she demonstrated grace. In spite of fatigue and preoccupations, she was very little, but they were living splendid moments of peace.
Right. That's awesome. So there's a couple of things. One of them, there's a quote that is repeated from Chiara that is in Italian, piccoli passi possibili. That means small possible steps. And then another thing, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to say something that typically gets a little bit overshadowed, but it's really not so in the shadow. That is that her husband was really virtuous as well. I don't want to say holy because this is still alive, but he supported her. He carried the cross with her, and in a sense had to consent to her waiting to give birth to the child, knowing that she would die later. There's a known case or example in their lives when Chiara was with already really ravaged by cancer, so to speak. Right, she was already in the process of dying, and she was praying before the chapel. And I'll read a little bit here because it's better to read it because I don't want to add too much to it. Right, so as these things were happening, Chiara was seated in a wheelchair, looking toward Jesus in the tabernacle and in the chapel, right? And her husband, Enrico, found the courage to ask her a question that he had been holding back. He didn't want to ask before because he suspected the answer, but he didn't want to, what if she does something that is not the right thing? I don't know, suppose, right? So she had been holding back, thinking of Jesus' phrase, my yoke is sweet and my burden light, which is taken from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 11, verse 30. My yoke is easy, my burden light, right? So, thinking of that phrase, he asked her, is this yoke, this cross, really sweet, as Jesus said? And a smile came across Chiara's face. She turned to her husband and said in a weak voice, yes, Enrico, it is very sweet. And I think that is a good testament to a reality that the world cannot understand. That is, that the cross of Christ, if carried with love for Christ and with Christ, is not only possible, but also a source of peace, right? And that was only possible for them because they had in mind another thing that this servant of God, Chiara, was also thinking, that we're not asked to do extraordinary things necessarily, but one thing at a time. If you want, in our language, in English, we would say one step at a time, or baby steps, right? She said small possible steps, right? So that's also, I want to, let's say, draw as a spiritual conclusion for this podcast, for this episode. For everyone listening, we all have crosses, right? We all have our things to carry, but we can carry them with Christ one day at a time. We don't know how long we will have to carry our cross. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. I remember also the example or a poem that Blessed or Saint John Newman wrote. He was an Anglican bishop who converted to the Catholic faith and then became bishop and cardinal. And he wrote a poem where he asked God, because he was in the struggle of converting and he was going to give up a lot of things, a lot of friends, a lot of prestige also in the Anglican Church in England. So he was seeing that the true church is the Catholic Church and not the Anglican Church. So as he saw that, he could quickly see the problems ahead, right? The storms ahead. So he asked God, don't show me the entire staircase, just show me the next step, right? So it's the same idea. one step at a time. Don't look ahead all the staircase because you may get discouraged. So don't get discouraged. Don't discourage yourself, right? Look at the next step and take that step, because you may only be asked to take 2 steps at a time, 1 step at a time, and nothing else. So you wanted to share a little bit of that.
Well, yeah, they were very good at that, looking at the small things, like even like Saint Therese's little way and everything like that. They loved Saint Francis of Assisi, and he had said, and they lived by that the contrary of love is not hate but possession. And so Enrico had said, our prayer was that we would not possess the life of Maria and their first daughter, that we would instead accompany her as far as we could and were able. And they used this their entire life, that they did not possess anything. Everything was a gift from the Lord. And so it was... Even their children. Exactly, their children. Even the opportunity to suffer was a gift in their eyes. And it's just the way that they looked at it. They looked at it as this cross. It was sweet because they got to walk with Christ in the way of the cross. And so it's beautiful that they could accept it in that way. And it's something very difficult, like you said, for us to understand, just because we are surrounded by a very opposite mentality that we deserve health, we deserve happiness, and the world in this world. And that is not true. Right. And we are being choked by lies. Our faith can be choked by lies in that sense. So they are just a beautiful example of carrying your cross, and one step at a time. It doesn't happen. It happens in the moments, in the little moments. Just like Chiara choosing to not abort. That was just one choice she made. She knew it was right. She made the choice, and that's just one thing that led them to the next part of their life. Right, and they were not looking at what's going to happen next, and what the rest of my life, I won't have this, or I won't have that, I won't be able to do this. This one thing at a time. This is the choice I have in front of me. This is the small step I can take. I will take this small possible good step, right? Very good. All right. Any other thing that you'd like to tell us about Chiara, and so that we can wrap up this story? I love that they likened their suffering to a dance. They were a very musically talented couple, and so they would, play. I forget what instruments, but they would play their instruments together. I think there's a picture of her playing the violin. Yes, and they composed poems and songs. And at every funeral, Enrico even wrote a song for her funeral. They wrote a song for their children that they lost. And that's joyful. Like, you praise God with song, and it's just beautiful. That's very human. Music is very human thing that becomes divine, because you use the gifts you're given and use them to praise the Lord. So it's beautiful that they turn their suffering into joy in that way. Wonderful. So thank you very much for sharing your stories today, and the story about Chiara today with us. We'll keep you in our prayers, hoping that your exam today goes well, that you get cleared. And I truly think that those who will have you as an EMT cleared senior professional or whatever that title is, will be blessed to have you in their ambulance. So thank you so much, Anne, for being with us today. So thank you, everyone, for being in our episode, sharing your time with us. I hope you're inspired by the story of Chiara to also carry your cross and trust in God and His divine providence, and in His goodness, He has a path for you to grow in holiness. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask me about Chiara or any other similar thing, please email me at info@forcollegecatholics.org. I'll put the show notes below in this episode with a link to the book and any other stories, a prayer actually that there is for the canonization of Chiara, so that you can also pray it, and to ask for graces if you have any grace that is given to you through the intercession of Chiara. So let us know, and we'll inform the appropriate authorities so that they know. So may God bless you today, and we'll see you next episode.